Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Welcome to this video where we're going to take a look at the results of the community survey back in July. This is going to be unscripted, so forgive any, coughs, hiccups, or awkward pauses, but I figure that's the best way to do one of these. So here we go. First question was, which games are played? And not really much of a surprise that Grimdark Future still remains by quite a large margin the most popular game. And then after that, the skirmish version of the most popular game. And then after that, we have fantasy and the fantasy skirmish. Regiments and war fleets seem to be the ones that are kind of trailing up at the rear. I find that kind of interesting that Quest is doing better than both than regiments and war fleets. So I guess folks really like that kind of RPG tabletop element more than playing rank and flank, which I'm kind of surprised. I figure if you have the models to play a Age of Fantasy game that you'd be willing to at least try a regiments game, but at the same time, if you have those models, you could play Quest as well. So let's move on. Next question here. How often? Once again, it looks like the bulk of players are playing once or twice a month, which, obviously most folks would like to probably play more than that. It seems to be, according to their analysis here, that it's a little bit bigger than last time, the number of people who are playing more. There's those lucky souls who get to play 3+ times a week, and I gotta say, I don't know how you don't get worn out, but still, there you have it. Once or twice a week is actually a fairly good slice of the pie there. But it looks like the majority of players are getting to play every week, every other week, 3 weeks a month, something like that, which is good. And I think connected to it is this next one here. Where do you play? And overwhelming at a friend's home. So that seems to be how people are getting into the hobby, which makes sense since it's still a relatively new game. It's only, 10 years old at this point? And it doesn't have a massive presence because of being model agnostic. You walk into a hobby store, you will see bolt action figures, Warhammer figures, Kings of War figures, but there's no OPR figures. The only way you're going to learn about it is usually from someone else bringing you in, and because someone else is bringing you in, your first couple games are probably going to be at their house. So that is still a massive share of the pie there for playing at someone else's house, followed by in a game store or a gaming club. Again, going to that idea that because this is very much a bring your friend in, because there's no physical presence of the game, outside of conventions and things like that. But you won't walk into a gaming store and see one-page rule stuff on the shelf, which does affect the way at which people come in. I actually had a conversation with the folks at Waterloo at the local game store that I collaborate with on this channel, and he had mentioned it's difficult for him to push it because there isn't something specific he can sell. Whereas if he has a Warhammer tournament, he'll sell Warhammer stuff. If he has a Magic tournament, he'll sell Magic stuff. But what about one-page rules? And I said to him, actually, if you have a one-page rules tournament, everything in the store can be played. But one could argue that if everything could be played, then that kind of negates that kind of focus of getting someone to buy into it. But still, it looks like the number one way that folks are getting into this is someone else is bringing them in. So then moving on, what community events would be most interested in attending? And again, overwhelming folks want to play the game casually, which I think makes perfect sense given how many players come to one-page rules from burnout on Games Workshop. They want to play a game that feels the same, that uses the models they already have, but they don't want it driven by intense rules, by a meta, or by a competitive scene. Because you'll notice that the very next thing is painting and hobby events, followed then by casual gaming at a convention. It is quite clear the players in one-page rules are not the ones who want to take this game super seriously, push it to the max, rules lawyer to find loopholes, min-max army builds, stuff like that. This is very much a casual, enjoy the game, enjoy the hobby. But it's also nice to see that 40% of people would be willing to play in a local tournament. So there is still a growing and a strong competitive element, but it definitely does not dominate the game. Okay, now, when you're building your armies, do you use your own custom names and lore? And the majority of players do. They name their heroes. Now, I wonder when they ask that, to what degree are we talking here? I've seen some players who actually have either 3D printed or etched or something like that nameplates to put across the bases of their favorite models to actually like name it. It's printed right there on the base. Whereas others come up with names on the fly. I mean, if you call your long range Space Marine or Battle Brother Captain Shooty McShootface, that doesn't count as naming your hero. But you get the idea. I'm actually surprised that naming the army isn't first. It's only down by a few points, but it seems like because this game allows you to customize so much, the idea would be for the army first and then the individual models and units within it. Down at the bottom there, 32% do not use custom names or lore. And my guess is those are the folks who they want to play the game. They're not interested in trying to craft their own army and backstory and history and paint scheme and all that. They just want to take the models that they have and put them on the table. So I do find this a pretty understandable comparison that in the previous question we saw lots and lots of people want to play this game casually, and a big part of casual play is connected to narrative play. That when you're building an army list, it's because you have a theme, you have an idea, you have a concept that you want to bring to life on the table. Whereas if you're more into competitive play, you're more interested in rules. You're more interested in math hammer and in figuring out how to get the most from the miniatures in terms of dice rolling. But if you're playing more casually, you put more time into painting, coming up with a theme, creating a paint scheme that's unique to it. So it doesn't surprise me that there's lots of players who like to name and give some character and personality to their armies here. Now, how do you paint your models? Number one, again, I create my own custom color schemes for my models, and that is super impressive, 88%. That is really interesting because we'll have to see if I can remember to come back to this when we get down to the question that says, where do you get most of your models? Because I know a lot of the people that I play against use old Warhammer models because they came to this game from Warhammer, and many of them paint their models in the Warhammer colors. So if they're playing Space Marines, they already have Ultramarines or Space Wolves or something like that, and so they paint them to look to match that scheme. Now, the folks who are going to be painting up official one-page rules models will naturally use their own custom color schemes because there aren't that many official ones out there to copy. Now, the one-page rules army books will change that. Each army book has entire pages dedicated to presenting different ideas for paint schemes for various factions and such. So I wonder if over time, as more and more of the army books come out, we are going to see that top category there. I try to paint models to match the official art and color schemes. I think we'll see those happening a little bit more often. So it'd be interesting to do a more detailed comparison of this. How do you paint your models compared with, well, where do you get them in the first place? All right, customization. How do you customize the models you use in your armies? Number one answer is I 3D print custom bits packages to customize my models. And then the close second is kit bashing, different kits and bits together to customize. Makes sense, given that one-page rules is going all in on 3D printing STL files, and those who are bringing in previous armies, they're already built, so there's nothing new to add. But that would also explain why number two is kit bashing. That folks who come to OPR but want to keep using Games Workshop stuff will be kit bashing those pieces. And now that 3D printing is ubiquitous, you can go on Etsy and whatever you want, you can find. I mean, my own, one of my recent projects, painting up a 30K themed army to use in one-page rules, I didn't want to pay Forge World prices to get boarding shields for some of my miniatures, so I went on Etsy and bought them from there. So it was a lot cheaper. Let's see there. Third place is does not customize at all, and that's understandable. I think customization, sculpting, that kind of thing is an art in and of itself. And some folks are amazing at painting, but the idea of sculpting capes and cloaks and hair and stuff like that, it just doesn't appeal to everybody. And then the lowest category is I custom sculpt and scratch build. So again, those are the true artists who do every element of army creation by themselves. And my hat's off to those people to be able to visualize an army, take various pieces to create it, add your own bits that you've sculpted, and then come up with your own paint scheme. Like, those are the really, really creative folks. Me, I take a model that's already built, I look at some paint schemes, find one I like, and basically copy it. Occasionally adding tweaks here or there, but it's very rare that I come up with my own paint scheme. So good on those folks. All right, have you ever used Army Forge Studio to create custom units, army books, or factions? Now, I believe the Army Forge Studio is still only available to Patreons. I could be wrong about that. But for the most part, no. Folks are saying no. So I'm guessing it's still a Patreon-only thing. If you're not interested in it, then obviously you're not interested in it. But if you are a Patreon and have never taken a look at it, you're actually losing out on some of what being a Patreon offers. And for those of you, if you're already super interested in custom building lore, custom scratch building or kit bashing your models, why not go that next step and custom build the units and the rules? Or you could take an existing army that you really, really like, but just a few things you want to tweak. Like, for example, I hate the fact that in the Human Defense Force, a lot of the officer rules only happen on activation instead of at the start of the turn. That would be something you could change in the studio. So it's a bit surprising that, like I said, I'd like to see this broken down more. For the people who say, no, I haven't used it, well, how many of them don't have access to it? How many people don't use it because they can't use it versus how many people could use it but just choose not to? And then fairly even breakdown for the other ones. Created custom units, created an entire army book or faction, or used it to adapt factions from another game into OPR. And interestingly, that's third. So more people are bringing in models from other games like maybe Kings of War or Halo or something like that, and then creating a book or unit rules to match it. So I think that one we will see change over time. Not dramatically, but I think we'll definitely see changes. Okay, here we go. What minis do you use to play? And self-printed is numero uno. Followed not too closely, is a pretty good gap there, by Warhammer miniatures. And then third place is other 3D printed. While I do love a lot of the files that OPR creates and puts on my mini factory, I think there are some amazing creators out there who have stuff that in some cases is even better. So it's interesting to see that self-printed is getting bigger. More and more people are attracted by the fact that you can print an entire army for far cheaper than buying Warhammer. A question I would like to see asked in a follow-up here is, for those who use Warhammer miniatures, how many of them had them and then came over into one-page rules and brought them with, versus how many came over to one-page rules and continue to buy Warhammer as their models of choice? Since many folks, not all, but many folks who come to OPR are tired of paying GW prices, I wonder how many, once they come over, then start to use 3D printed miniatures, either getting a printer and doing it themselves or buying other printed miniatures from online. And then, let's see, fourth place there, other physical miniatures, so other games. For example, I still haven't painted them up, but I'm hoping to one day turn the models from my Halo tabletop game and use those as a skirmish team for Battle Brothers or Prime Brothers or maybe even Human Defense Force. But really, really viable option. That's the great thing about model agnostic. Okay. Do you use any of the advanced rulebooks for our games? Not overwhelming, but the clear majority is yes. What's very strange is the second one. No, I've purchased them or downloaded them, but never used them. Now, I wonder how many folks know all what's in there. This isn't meant to be an attack or a roast, but I'm imagining they do use some of the rules, but don't realize it. Like if you use advanced activations like Hunker Down or Assault or Last Stand, you're now using elements of the advanced rulebook. So unless you are using just the primer that they offer for free on the website, I imagine most players have dabbled in different map setups. Even if a friend set up the mission from the advanced rulebook and you played it, you could say that you have used the advanced rulebooks. So I wonder if the blue slice of the pie here should be a lot bigger, just because some players aren't aware that they have, or maybe they are but didn't think of it like, well, I didn't create the game that we played using an advanced rulebook, but if you participated in someone else's game that did, then I would say you used it. And for those of you who have purchased them but haven't taken a look at them yet or used them, absolutely do so. They add lots of richness, lots of variety, lots of depth to the game without overwhelming you. You can always just add this piece and this piece, but not that one. It's not like playing Warhammer, where you take the whole rulebook or none of the rulebook. There's no mixing and matching. So, short little plug there for the advanced rulebooks. Okay. Which advanced rules do you use? The missions. Clear out in front, followed closely by the advanced actions, and then the advanced rules for terrain. So basically, they're taking the stuff that makes the real core elements of any game and adds to them a little bit. So terrain, activations, and missions. Because otherwise you have to play the same one mission over and over and over. So again, this is why I'm wondering if more folks should have clicked yes on the above question and just didn't think of it. They thought maybe I don't own it or I haven't read it and consciously used it. But if you participated in someone else's game that used it, you could say yes. Let's see, what else is showing up here? Advanced deployment styles. Those are lots of fun. They add some kind of quirky elements and force you to rethink your strategy right from the get-go. And then surprisingly, after those four at the top, the fifth is I don't use any advanced rules. So 30% of players just stick with the core rule set. And then there's lots of the other bits there. I still haven't been able to try everything that's in here. My hope was to work through it all within a year, but there's just so much I haven't gotten to it all. I've tried a lot of them. It looks like some of the ones people are interested in trying, the command points. I can't imagine that wasn't inspired by all the Warhammer folks coming over and then saying, well, let's see how they work in OPR. Random events, battlefield effects, advanced casting, multiplayer battles, kitchen table games seem to be the other ones, whereas the least tried are phased battles, siege battles, massive battles, boarding actions. That doesn't surprise me. Those are very, very situational. I mean, siege battles are a lot of fun, but unless you have the terrain to do it, you're not going to do it. And the one that does surprise me is the twists and gambits, because that to me is kind of belongs up with advanced missions. And not quite deployment styles, but it belongs with advanced missions. So if you do enjoy the advanced missions, which clearly is the number one reason people use the advanced rules, try the twists and gambits. It kind of plays around with the idea of objectives and how you use them. Alrighty. Now, the other one, I'm a little bit curious there. Multiplayer battles, and then at the very bottom, multiplayer games. I'm wondering if that was a typo, or if there's something I'm not seeing here. Multiplayer battles versus multiplayer games. I don't know. If anyone can clear that up, what the difference between the two is. Because 23 people said they do multiplayer games. But I'm not sure what that means. Have you played a continuing campaign in any of our games? Small group says yes. Most say no, but would be interested. So I would say what you have here is lots of one-offs, people meeting in friends' houses. I wouldn't call it ad hoc playing, but you go to your friend's house when you can. And when you can, especially coupled with that other question about how often do you play, if you're only able to play once or twice a month, it's kind of hard to turn that into a campaign. More like if you're playing once a week, that lends itself more easily to a campaign because there's constant reminder, participation, and growth in the campaign. So there's a lot of people who want to. You can see there the yellow sliver, no, and I'm not interested, very, very tiny. But the majority of players either do or would be interested in it. Now, what that means is the Rangers are going to have to fill in there. That you have to have folks who want to run a campaign. There's lots of folks interested in participating, but running one's a little bit trickier. So, if you're the kind of person that would be willing to run a campaign, according to this graph, there's probably within your local gaming store or gaming community enough people to run a slow grow campaign, a narrative story campaign. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but something that links battles together. All right, what else do we got here? If you have played a campaign in any of our games, how many players were involved? And it looks like the largest is I have not played in any. And that seems to be almost the same slice of the pie as the one above. I know the numbers won't line up exactly, but it looks like 2 players, 3 to 5, are the largest, 5 to 10, 20 or more. So we don't have too big of groups here. I know when I ran the Slow Grow campaign at the beginning of summer for new players to learn how to play and build up their army, we had a grand total of, I think, 10 people who throughout the whole campaign showed up at least once, and we had about 4 or 5 who showed up more regularly. So that, I guess, according to this map, we were a bit not ahead of the curve, but we were in a more, a narrower slice of pie here. So from the look of it here, people are interested, they just don't know how or where to do it. Okay, do you make your own campaigns or use pre-made mission packs for the campaigns? And overwhelming people haven't, so they don't. For those who do, they create their own. Now, I'd be curious if they would break this up according to game, like Grimdark Future versus Quest or Skirmish, because I find narrative really works well with those smaller games like Quest and Skirmish, because those are, the whole point of those is narrative driven, whereas the big battles, you can have campaigns, but once you start adding the benefits and disadvantages, like for battle wounds and bonuses for surviving, that can really throw off the big game. So it seems to me that the folks who are going to get the most out of a campaign, probably, that is if it's a story campaign, not a slow grow or learn how to play campaign. But if it's a story-driven campaign, I would recommend starting with Quest or Skirmish or something small like that. It just lends itself more to it, at least I would think. All right, which of our recent narrative campaigns or mission packs interest you the most? Well, look at that, the Void Sun. And that is the one that just came out, but that's for Grimdark Future. So that's very interesting because that completely throws off everything I just said. So it seems people want to play the big battles in a campaign setting, which might be why there aren't so many. Running a campaign with massive armies and trying to make sure everyone keeps track of that seems more difficult than a Quest or a Skirmish campaign. So very curious. There's a demand for full-size campaigns out there. Boy, there's a lot of questions on campaigns here. What's more important to you in a narrative campaign or mission pack? Number one, the missions need to be engaging, and then a sense of continuity or progression. So obviously in a narrative, you want things chained together, but the missions need to be engaging. I mean, you'd want that even if it's not a campaign or a narrative kind of generated thing. You want every mission to be engaging. I think that works just with like what we saw, what was it, up here, where the thing people use the most are advanced missions. If you play more than once a week or you play a couple times a month, playing the same mission gets boring. So it looks like what players want is variety. Not necessarily chained together, but they just don't want to have the same experience every time. So that's why I think the writing or the mission jam was a really, really good idea, because it kind of outsourced creating missions and allowed players with great ideas to submit what they had. And if you haven't checked already, the results of the mission jam are in, and yours truly did not even make the podium. So that sucks. But congratulations to those who did. Okay. Now, I can't even fit this whole thing in one. So what Age of Fantasy armies do you play? Number one, it is a dead tie between the vampiric undead and the Saurians. So people like playing lizards and vampires. That's very curious, because I'd be curious if over in Warhammer, if those are two of the more popular armies there. I'd be curious why. They don't ask why do you play these certain armies. They just have them here. And then what are some of the other more popular ones? Dwarves, Human Empire, Ratmen, and Wood Elves. Now, I was about to say, so it's the ones that have got recent STL files, like the Dwarves, like the Wood Elves, but the Ratmen, they're in technically second place. And yet they haven't, they got some new sculpts. They did. Okay, so I'd take that back there. So it seems that when people get new models, they're inspired to start new armies. Whereas the ones that don't, like the Deep Sea Elves, Giants, Guilds, Halflings, Havoc Dwarves, Kingdom of Angels, Ossified Undead, Sky City Dwarves, and Volcanic Dwarves. Yeah, all right, so that makes sense. The more niche armies that OPR does not have models for are the least popular. Which Age of Fantasy Quest classes do you play? Most popular is a fighter. I mean, that, of course. Followed by a barbarian, which is in various another form of fighter. Followed by a ranger, which is a fighter at distance. And then a wizard. Oh, and a paladin, which is another form of fighter. Okay, yeah. Let's moving on to Grimdark Future. Most popular army is the Human Defense Force. So it looks like people really, really like either those models or just something about the play style. Second place, very close, the Battle Brothers. Alien Hives look like they have slipped to third. And then the least popular, the Jesters, the Gangs. Now the Goblin Reclaimers, I would say they're just down there because they haven't been out long enough for people to try them out. Plus, you're going to see that number explode now that OPR has announced they're going to be making Goblin Reclaimer models. That their new sci-fi army line is going to be Goblin Reclaimer. So I'm guessing in the next year you're going to see that shoot way, way up. Infected Colonies, Rebel Guerrillas, and let's see what else, Soul Snatcher. So yeah, the ones that are very niche, one-off, they don't... yeah, it makes sense which ones are not doing quite as well. But the most popular ones are humans. Either superhumans or regular humans, but humans. Followed by definitely not humans. And then more not humans. Interesting. And then in Grimdark Future Quest, most popular is the Soldier, which would be the sci-fi equivalent of the Fighter. Next we have the Pathfinder, which I believe would be the equivalent of the Ranger, then the Commander and Technomancer. No one wants to be, or few people want to be instigators or ritualists. And yeah, I don't play a lot of quests, so I'm afraid I don't know the details about what an instigator or ritualist does, but just, yeah, this instigator, that sounds like something that at an elementary school to help children with special needs. It just doesn't sound that interesting. Warfleets. Even though it's not a very popular game among OPR players, it's got its own It's got its own topic here. What faction most popular? Again, Human Defense Force. Now, I'd be curious about the models. OPR doesn't have too many models for the fleets, but it's the most popular again, followed by Battle Brothers, Alien Hives, and Robot Legion. So very interesting. If you play Grimdark Future, you use the exact same factions in Warfleets as you do in the full game. That's pretty fascinating. Okay, so there we have it. That's the state of the game. They've been asking a lot about narrative. There are a couple questions they took away. They used to ask, where did you buy the models? Not necessarily what ones do you use. I guess they kind of wrapped it in there. As I mentioned, there are a few questions I wish they would ask almost as follow-up or split to get a better idea of specifics among various games rather than just treat all OPR games as one. But this is still pretty good. This is a fairly detailed snapshot of the game and the community. So tell me what you guys think. What direction do you think the game's going from here? What do you think some of the trends and patterns are, and where they might go from here on? So thanks for listening, and until next time, keep your dice on the table.